Badass of the Week is produced by High Five Content and $7 Productions. The ground of Uruk doesn't just shake, it shatters. Each massive footfall of the Bull of Heaven opens a fissure in the earth, swallowing hundreds of screaming citizens whole. This isn't a beast of flesh and blood. It's a storm wrapped in hide, sent by the death goddess Ishtar to erase a king who dared defy her. But Gilgamesh doesn't flinch. He stands at the gates of his city, his muscles like carved cedar, his skin bronze under the Mesopotamian sun. To his left stands Enkidu, the wild man born in the wilderness, the only creature on earth strong enough to call the king his battle brother. The bull charges. Its breath is a hurricane that levels orchards. Its horns are sharpened obsidian, long enough to impale a dozen men at once. But as the beast lunges, Enkidu leaps. He seizes the bull by its massive curved horns, his heels digging furrows into the dirt as he heaves against the strength of a god. Now, Gilgamesh, he bellows. The king of Uruk moves. He doesn't strike with fear. He strikes with the cold, calculated precision of a god king. He lunges forward, his heavy bronze sword gleaming. With a roar that echoes from the mountains to the sea, Gilgamesh plunges the blade deep into the bull's neck, right between the shoulder blades and the horns. The beast lets out a final, earth-shaking howl and collapses, the dust of its fall coating the city in a golden shroud. Gilgamesh stands over the carcass, drenched in blood. He looks at the heavens where the gods watch in stunned silence. But as the adrenaline fades and the silence returns to Uruk, Gilgamesh looks at his hands. He has conquered the realms of men. He has conquered the wilderness. He has conquered the gods themselves. But he is about to realize that there is one enemy no wall can keep out and no sword can slay: death itself. Hello, and welcome back to Badass of the Week, the show where we tell the badass history of badasses. I am joined today by a very special guest to help me tell a very special story. He's a teacher, writer, a storyteller. He's worked with film companies, publishers. Anyone looking to tell a good story might have at some point worked with Dr. John Bucher. John, thank you so much for coming on the show. We're really lucky to have you here.
Ben, it's a treat to be here. I'm a fan of the show and really excited to get to talk to you about another badass on this Mount Olympus of badasses that you've created.
Thank you. Yeah, I've done an episode. We're going to be talking about maybe the original badass of the week today. I think you could maybe say it's one of the first stories of it.
He's the OG for sure.
He's the OG. He puts the G in OG. We're going to be talking about Gilgamesh, and right. I do have to say that my traditional co-host, Dr. Pat Larish, was very sad that she couldn't make it on this episode. She was trying everything. She's like, I'm just going to call out sick at school today so that I can stay home and record about Gilgamesh because I've got to do this story, but it didn't work out, unfortunately. No worries. She's got to be here with us in spirit.
No worries.
So, John, you're the executive director of the Joseph Campbell Foundation. And I think maybe the way to start would be to talk about what is that and who was Joseph Campbell?
Yeah, it's a good place to start for sure. So a lot of people will be familiar with Joseph Campbell's work, but they might not know who he was. But Joseph Campbell was a teacher, a writer, a thinker, a philosopher, and he wrote this book in 1949 called The Hero with a Thousand Faces. And what he was looking into with that book is he felt like he kept seeing all these patterns over and over in all of human history's stories and in their myth and their literature. And he even saw these patterns in history with these significant figures. And he called these patterns the hero's adventure. And later, after the book had been out a while, people started calling this the hero's journey. And he, was like, okay, let's call it the hero's journey. And even though that's not a phrase he used in the original book. But this idea that a lot of people, have become familiar with of someone leaving their normal life and their normal world and going out into the world on an adventure, encountering obstacles and bad guys and having help, with wise people and then getting some sort of treasure and bringing that back home. This is the idea of the hero's journey. And there's, a little denouement to the story that in the late 60s, early 70s, a guy named George Lucas reads Joseph Campbell's book. And he says, I've been working on the space opera, and I think this might crack the code for what I'm trying to do here. So he applies Joseph Campbell's hero's journey to Star Wars. And, obviously Star Wars becomes a big hit. And Star Wars actually, follows the hero's journey pretty closely, but even beyond the use of the hero's journey in Star Wars, George Lucas befriends Joseph Campbell, and Joseph Campbell becomes like a mentor to George Lucas. And, near the end of Campbell's life, George Lucas is quoted as saying, Joseph Campbell is my Yoda. He's the wise source, that I go to. So that's a little bit about who Campbell was and his work in the world. So if you've ever seen a story from Star Wars to Harry Potter to the Hunger Games, they all use a very similar form, and it's this hero's journey, and we can thank Joseph Campbell for that. So at the Joseph Campbell Foundation, we exist to continue Campbell's work, to help people become familiar with the ideas, of Campbell. And really what we've kind of pivoted into is inviting people to experience the power of myth, which is what these stories like Gilgamesh really allow us to do, is experience myth in a way that still feels relevant to us, even the thousands of years after this story was initially told.
It's a really interesting thing because, I took a screenwriting course, of course, like at some point in college, and, that says one of the assigned readings is The Hero with a Thousand Faces. And, you do the hero's journey and you start to talk about it. It's like, you can almost like at this point, the story is so well known that you can kind of yada yada the whole thing. And goes and has an adventure, fights some bad guys, fights the thing, comes back, all of his people are happy, everything's good. Like it's not just like, George Lucas did it for Star Wars, but literally every movie you go see today follows this pattern. And if it doesn't, you're like, that was weird. I did not expect what was going to happen there. They did something really strange. He didn't meet a wise old guy who gave him a quest, and he went on the quest and had the adventure. What is this?
No, it's really true.
And then somebody like you will come in and be like, actually, they totally did that. They just did it in a slightly different order, and it messed you up because you're not used to seeing it that order.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the funny thing is, like, there are a lot of people, that are sort of contrarian by nature and say, well, I don't want to do it how everyone else has done it. I'm going to do it this way. And almost without fail, you can still see how they're using that template and that model. They're just twisting it, or turning it a bit, which is, what good storytelling is all about. So I think if you want to change the order of things or throw people off their game, you have to understand what they're expecting to see, and then don't give them that, right? Absolutely. Yeah. And it's sort of funny because we take these things for granted now as just that's the way stories are told, but when we look back to, the periods that even we'll be talking about today, these stories weren't necessarily always told this way. Greek tragedies were told in 2 acts and in 2 big, sections. Mm-hmm. And it really wasn't until Aristotle that somebody said, I think a good story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And that is something that, we see actually in the Epic of Gilgamesh that we'll be talking about today, that was way ahead of its time, because people were not necessarily always telling stories with a beginning, a middle, and an end. Sometimes it's just a beginning and an end. And that was how they were used to getting their stories.
Right. And that's so interesting. When we started talking about having you come on the show, I was like, well, who do you want to talk about? And you're like, I should talk about Joseph Campbell. And I was like, okay, I read his book. And I guess it's like so prevalent that, of course, like everybody's read his book at this point, right? Or Save the Cat, which is based off his book, or something along those lines, right? And then I was like, I didn't really think about it. So I don't actually know much about him other than I've read probably 3 or 4 of his books. Yeah. And then I was like, I'm not going to look up anything because then I'll just be surprised when you can tell me about it, because so I'm curious.
Yeah, no, I mean, he really was a badass. He was somebody, that at a young age, and this was sort of popular to do in the early part of the last century, where, when somebody became of age, oftentimes they would just decide, I'm going to go set off on a quest, and I'm going to travel overseas, and I'm going to see the world, and I'm going to read literature from around the world. And this is something Joseph Campbell did. He gets on a boat and he goes to Europe and he meets all these interesting figures. There's this young man he meets named Krishnamurti that is said to be the second coming of God. And Krishnamurti, when he becomes a teenager, is like, I know you all are saying that, but I'm not it. I'm not it. But he becomes this really wise person that Joseph Campbell keeps a relationship with the rest of his life. Wow. Joseph Campbell, on these travels over to Europe, he meets this sculptor named Angela Gregory, and they have this passionate romance, and he stays connected to her the rest of his life. And he comes back to the United States, and he travels up to Northern California, and he moves in with John Steinbeck and John Steinbeck's wife, and they have all of these adventures going on this boat trip up to Alaska, and Joseph Campbell has an affair with John Steinbeck's wife, and John Steinbeck finds out about it, and there's all of these aspects to Campbell's story that before he goes on to write The Hero with a Thousand Faces, he lives a lot of life that gives him a lot of perspective in things to write about, which I think is something we often miss, that in order to really have something to say in the world, we really need to go live some life in order to have some perspective, and he did that.
It's something you don't think about, because in a lot of ways the hero's journey book is a little dry, but it is talking about like badass stuff from history and adventures and killing and war and fighting and all of this really exciting, interesting stuff. It's like how to tell an exciting story that's going to give people's attention, but he kind of is approaching it from a very academic standpoint, which is interesting. And wow, I didn't know any of that stuff about him. It's one of those things that if you went and saw the movie of his life, you'd be like, well, they probably added a bunch of weird stuff to make it a better story.
But, and to your point about, I'll tell you, the first time I tried to read The Hero with a Thousand Faces, I got about 2 pages in, and I was like, I can't get through this. This is like over my head. It's just so dry. It's so deep. It's complicated.
I'm not smart enough to process this.
I wasn't. Now, I since then I've went on and got a PhD in mythology, and now I can read it and understand it. But fortunately, and you mentioned some of them a few minutes ago, there's been a lot of people that have really done a great job at distilling those ideas. My friend Christopher Vogler wrote a book called The Writer's Journey that's really helpful in understanding.
I've read it.
Those ideas. Yeah. Blake Snyder wrote Save the Cat, and it's really helpful in understanding those ideas. So a lot of people, have taken those ideas and put them into a form that you can understand. And to be honest, it's not so much about getting the dogma of the exact words as much as the ideas that Joseph Campbell had. And that's really what's important.
Right. And then that's the tradition that you guys are carrying on at the foundation.
That's right.
So that's Joseph Campbell. That's John Bucher. And coming up after the break, we are going to get into one of these. We're going to get into the original 5,000-year-old mythological badass. A guy who I always like to start with a quote. And one of my favorites here is like, surpassing all other kings, heroic in stature, brave scion of Uruk, wild bull on the rampage. We're going to talk Gilgamesh after this break. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to Badass of the Week. I am here with John Bucher from the Joseph Campbell Foundation. And John, when we were like talking about who we were going to do for the show, you were like, let's go with Gilgamesh. And I think that's perfect because he's kind of the original badass. So is that why you picked it?
It is. I mean, I honestly, I love going back to, I am old enough that I was really into hip hop and rap the first time it went through its golden age. And so I love the OGs. I love these people that sort of originated the form, and all these people sort of copied later. And that's really what we see with Gilgamesh, is this OG that originates the idea of every modern hero and action hero that we see, somebody who is a badass that really has to learn some tough lessons and go through a lot of violence and pain and fighting in order to get some hard fought truths. And, Gilgamesh in many ways is also like the original superhero, because, Gilgamesh is 2/3 divine and 1/3 human. And so he's kind of got this mix of the supernatural and human. And, later we see like Hercules kind of take on some of these same type ideas. But I like to trace it all the way back to the oldest story that we have of this type, and it's Gilgamesh.
Yes. I was thinking about this the other day because I was trying to explain how important the Matrix was. There was this 20-year-old, and I was trying to tell him, like, no, you don't get it. And like, I watched it. I guess I don't really get it. And it's like, no, it's just like, it's because you've been watching your entire life. You've been watching movies that saw the Matrix and have been ripping it off since then, and doing it better and better with better technology and all of this stuff. But like when that came out, it blew my mind. Yeah. And I cannot tell you that's like it's so over troped now that like it's silly, but at the time it was mind blowing. Yeah. So what is the time frame for Gilgamesh?
So I mean, we there's a little bit of debate in the academic world, but always is, right? There always is. But we really think it probably goes back to the third dynasty of which is around like 2100 years before the Common Era, or some people would say 2100 BC. That's sort of the era that we're talking about. But we have about 2,000 years of different tablets being written and discovered, where people find different versions of the story and different translations of the story. But we're talking about the Mesopotamian world, which is kind of modern day Iraq, and that world 2,000 years before like the time of Jesus. We're talking about a long time ago, right? Yes. This is going way back. And one of the things,
cuneiform tablets and that sort of thing, bronze weapons.
I mean, that's the thing, is like any story we have about some angry dude with a sword, before that dude, there was Gilgamesh, and it's sort of based on Gilgamesh, right?
It's like it's like how I always think about John Carter of Mars with science fiction.
Yes, exactly.
Predated all these guys. Angry dude was the original angry dude with a sword.
Yeah.
And for Gilgamesh, for being like the original epic hero, and you said comic books, and like we said, there's a bunch of different versions of the story. We've kind of codified it at this point, but it's like, if you go back to even with Batman, even with comic book heroes, we have 20 different origin stories for these guys, all different paths. Well, it depends on in the Frank Miller run, he was more like this, but in most of these stories, for being like the greatest epic hero of all time, or the original one, he starts off as a dick.
The worst. He is the worst. Yeah. I mean, they are literally, bullying everybody around them. They're building, he's got people that he's enslaved, and they're building this tall wall, and, they build it up tall enough that, the people are like, nobody could ever climb over this wall. And he's like, I don't care, build it taller, keep going, build it taller. And he also, huge dick move here, he decides, I have access and the right to sleep with any and every woman in my entire kingdom whenever I decide. So whenever I see somebody I want, I snap my fingers and she's brought to me that night. this does not set well with the people of right? They are like, this is the worst. This is the worst guy to live under. But they also recognize this guy's built different. He's part God, part human. You know, what are we going to do here? This is awful.
Yes. So he's the king of Uruk. He's conquered the city. He's conquered basically all known humanity at this point. And yeah, he can visit any woman he wants. Any guy has a problem with it, he challenges him to a feat of strength, in which he always wins. He's beating up. He's just tyrannizing, like terrorizing the population of his city. And then they have to like pray to the gods to help them against their king, who they hate. Right. And that's the epic hero that we're going to be talking about today.
I love that though, because the story opens, you know, with basically saying no one can check this guy. And I love starting with somebody that we recognize they've got to change if they're going to be the hero of this story. Because in many ways, it's not that interesting to me if you start with somebody that's already perfect. Like, who cares about that, you know?
Yeah.
I think it's really an interesting story because he starts out with, as we might say in the modern age, a lot of room for growth, shall we say.
In the modern movies, he just has a bad job and like his girlfriend hates him. But here, he's like the king of a city and everybody hates him.
It's really, really true. And when the people cry out to the gods, for help, I love sort of how the gods respond here, because you talk about a creative move, you know, in the creation of Enkidu. It's not what you would anticipate, where, you know, even later, like in Judeo-Christian traditions, you know, you have Jesus come to the earth in the form of this person who's awesome, right?
I'm going to teach you guys. I'm going to teach this terrible king some lessons. I'm going to give him some parables. The first two aren't going to take, but the third one's going to change his life. He'll learn the error of his ways. Yada yada yada. No, they send down a Terminator to kick his ass.
Yeah, it's Alien versus Predator. You know, it's Alien versus Predator in the ancient world of, let's send down this beast man who is just as awful in many ways, you know, as Gilgamesh. And I mean, when those two guys battle, they don't debate philosophy or something. They wrestle so hard that the whole city shakes. And this battle just goes on and on. And it is like an action movie, because, you know, it's Godzilla versus King Kong just knocking down buildings everywhere.
Right. It's the Zack Snyder Superman, where they're like, him and Zod are blowing up half the like city, demolishing city blocks. They're like throwing each other through gas stations and stuff.
Right, exactly.
He shows up and he's like, hey, the gods sent me to put you in your place. And Gilgamesh is like, you're not going to stop me. And that's it. It's on.
Exactly. And that in some ways, you know, I think it does inspire these later stories that we have, where we see these two titan, monstrous type, you know, figures or creatures just battling it out. And in some ways, you know, we always feel like there has to be a winner now, but that's kind of where the story subverts our expectations a bit, because these two, they end up with no winner, and it's just this mutual respect in the end, where they don't end up hating each other. They kind of, in the end, are like, oh man, you're the only person alive that really gets me. This is like ancient warrior culture at its finest, you know, that they're like, you really get me. And they become like brothers. They become the best of friends.
Yes. And that's the wildest thing, because it is like pretty classic, like protagonist, antagonist, right? The Gilgamesh is the civilized man who does terrible things. And then Enkidu is the wild, untamed man who like has a sense of pride and nobility that in some versions he gets from having sex with a prostitute for 7 days straight. We'll skip over that. But these two guys fight, and like they're like, you know, it's when Enkidu shows up, it's like when you intro the cop in the early part of the movie, and you're like, all right, these guys are going to throw it out at the end of the movie, except it immediately cuts to that climax. They beat each other up, demolish the city, and they're like, you know what? You're cool.
right, exactly.
Maybe we can team up and beat up a bunch of other guys.
Right. Which again, I feel like that's a pretty progressive action hero story, you know, of what if we combined forces. And this is, do you remember like in the Rocky series, like this is what happens with Rocky and Apollo Creed,
Yes.
right? Is they're the worst of enemies, you know, they fight and battle, but then they eventually decide, you know what? We're actually just like each other, and they start training each other. You know,
running on the beach together.
yeah, they become best friends. It's Gilgamesh and Enkidu, man.
Yeah, and so I guess in this version of the story, Clubber Lang is Humbaba.
That's right. Well, you know what?
Fire-breathing ogre that lives in the mountains. Lives in an unsummable mountain past a forest, past the greatest forest on earth. And they're like, I don't know. I've heard about him. I never met him. Maybe he's cool, but let's get him.
Well, and little known fact, Humbaba had the Mr. T haircut in the ancient world. No, I'm kidding. I'm just messing with you about it.
Shoot, man, you're the expert. I don't know.
Right. No, but and you mentioned we you know, we won't get deep into like the sex that's involved in this story, but there is a lot of sex in this.
I remember that being shocking when I
story.
first started getting into I first started taking classes on Greek myth in college, because you get the like kids books of Greek myths and you're like, oh, this is fun, you know, and then you get up and then you start to read the real versions. And you're like, oh, these guys are like super horny. This is all like weird sex stuff.
Right. It's really, really true. And it's a little bit, you know, shocking because it gives us also sort of a view into the ancient world, you know, where in some versions of the story, you'd mentioned Enkidu, you know, has sex with this. In some version of the story, she's like a sacred prostitute. In other versions of the story, she's kind of like this goddess of eroticism, you know. And so there's some really interesting characters, you know, here, but it also pivots where all the women in this story are not just like sex objects, because we have the goddess Ishtar, you know, coming up, who really is kind of a badass in and of herself in this story.
Yes, definitely. And, you know, it is interesting. You don't like the idea. It's like the weird thought that like your great grandfather was thinking about sex. That's weird. Right. But yes, the women in the story are powerful, and Ishtar is not to be messed with. She's going to show up in a minute. And, and she's I mean, in a lot of like Babylonian religious practices, I think there were like human and animal sacrifices devoted to her. So she's for real. She's a goddess of sex and love and death. Right.
And she's got her own
Freya
stories.
Like too.
Freya is a great example. And, you know, Ishtar actually ends up having her own stories later where, you know, she goes to the underworld to save her husband or a sister's husband, at one point. And there's this really interesting story, you know, that the Akkadians pronounced her name Inanna rather than Ishtar, but the descent of Inanna becomes a really popular story, and it's sort of like, you know, where one character in the story gets a spin-off later, and they get their own movie. That's what happens with Ishtar.
I will say, John, I don't want to get too much into that one, because when Pat couldn't make it today, she was like, I want to do a spin-off episode and I want to do Inanna Goes Down to the Underworld. So we're doing that. So no spoilers for that episode.
No spoilers. All right. No spoilers.
Do the spin-off. We'll do Gilgamesh 2, Inanna's Descent to the Underworld.
Yes.
Later this week or maybe next week, it's a future episode of Badass of the Week, I promise.
Okay. I love it. Well, back to Humbaba for a second. I also didn't want to jump away from him too much, because, you know, when Gilgamesh goes after Humbaba, it's not like Humbaba was attacking Uruk. There was no like emergency. He went monster hunting really for fame, not really for, you know, necessity. He just wanted his name to last forever. He was afraid of being forgotten, and he was like, I'm afraid, so let's go kill something enormous.
What's the biggest meat? It's like prison. Like kick somebody's ass, kick the biggest guy's ass your first day. Like Enkidu, you're with me. Who can we get? The gods are like, why did we do this? This was a really bad idea. Why did we send this guy down? Beat up Gilgamesh. Now there's two of them.
Amazing.
So they travel to this cedar forest that's far away from the city and is not bothering the city at all. It's a preemptive strike, maybe.
Yeah,
if you want to be really generous about it.
Oh, and it's a chance for these guys to explore their bromance that keeps blossoming. Where Gilgamesh and Enkidu, get to kind of go Batman and Robin on the forest here a bit.
This is the love story of this epic. Is these two guys just being just being bros, just doing the you talk to Apollo Creed doing like the Schwarzenegger, like Carl Weathers, like fist bump from Predator. That's right. So they head out there and they engage the monster. He's a fire-breathing ogre. He's got tusks. He lives on a mountain that can't be summited through an impenetrable forest. And he's the guardian of the forest, which makes him sound more like a sympathetic character than a villain that needs to be destroyed. But Gilgamesh has plans.
Yeah, and well, we later also learn, he's a deity that later there's sort of some regret that they didn't approach him with a little bit more respect, actually, because there's divine forces running through his bones, that they sort of just take for granted. And it's kind of something that's interesting about this story to me is there's this constant tension between Gilgamesh's ego and him wanting to just like go for it and do whatever he wants, and then sort of having to backtrack a little bit and being like, oh man, maybe that was not the best idea. There's this constant back and forth tension, that I really relate to when I read the story, and I'm like, yeah, that's I get why this story has survived for so many thousands of years, because it tells me even back in the day, people were kind of still wrestling with these same impulses inside themselves that I'm still wrestling with today.
Right. Just because somebody told me I shouldn't do it doesn't mean I should do it just to prove them wrong. Right. Maybe they know maybe they were right that I just shouldn't have done that because it was stupid. Right. Or misguided or just maybe evil. Right. But they go to Humbaba, they kill him, they pull out his lungs, they cut off his tusks, they deforest the mountain of cedar and raft home on it, and then use the wood to build those walls even higher. Yes.
Those walls just keep going higher and higher and higher, man.
Okay, so maybe this is a good time to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about. We mentioned Ishtar ahead of time. She's gonna come into the story here, and you're not gonna want to miss it when she does. So we'll be right back. All right, welcome back to Badass of the Week. I am here with John Bucher from the Joseph Campbell Foundation. And John, we have now clear-cut the most famous forest in Babylon and overthrown the gods and killed giant demons and stuff. So we've now gotten the attention of the goddess Ishtar, who we've mentioned before is the goddess of sex, death, and everything in between. Yeah. She's mad. Or she's not mad yet.
She's not mad yet, but she's sort of like, I remember this old Chris Rock routine where Chris Rock used to say, he encountered this woman that didn't just say, oh, I want a man like that. I want that guy. And I'm not going to give up until I get that guy. And it's sort of the same thing here. Ishtar doesn't say, I want somebody like Gilgamesh. She's like, no, I want him, and I'm not going to settle for less. And she offers him sex and power and kingship and all this stuff. And he's just not into it. He says no every time. And not only says no, but then begins to publicly roast her past lovers. This is a bold move on Gilgamesh's part.
In his defense, I feel like some of them had been like transformed into like spiders and wolves and things after being with her, which sounds kind of cool. But I think if you're Gilgamesh, you don't want to get transformed into a spider. Right. And so there is kind of like a little bit of a Black Widow praying mantis thing happening here where she's like, I want this guy, but I'm also going to eat his head after we're done having sex and consume his power. So maybe he's onto something with not wanting to be in on that, but I don't know.
It's a good point. It's a good point. It's a strong argument.
Yeah. I'm trying to frame him as heroically as possible here, but he does turn her down in a very public way. And she storms off to the gods and demands a nuclear warhead.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of pretty badass of Gilgamesh that he survives this encounter with this goddess, because honestly, there's a lot of heroes that are smote for much less than what Gilgamesh has done by spurning her advances. But
Ariadne was like, "Hey, I made this really nice quilt," and Athena was like, "You're done."
Right. But you're right.
A spider forever.
Yeah, you're a spider forever. You're not coming back from this, buddy. But you're right. When she does go to the gods to ask for a weapon, I mean, she asked for the ultimate divine weapon of mass destruction here, which is the bull of heaven, and that the bull of heaven shook fear in the hearts of people just to hear the name, because at the time in Mesopotamia, a bull was probably the scariest creature that they often encountered. Just it's massive, it's huge, it's wild, it can't be tamed. It seems like it can just destroy you and overpower you. And this is a culture that values strength, right? That values whoever is the biggest, baddest, strongest wins. How are you ever going to defeat a bull that's a divine bull at that?
And it's huge. It's just like you talk about King Kong. Like this is not a regular bull. And yeah, they're super aggressive, right? Like you wouldn't think, but bulls are super aggressive, super destructive. Yeah. Probably killed a lot of people around this time or maimed them horribly. And we've got one that's the size. We've got one that can look over the top of Gilgamesh's walls, storming into town. And as it's galloping ahead, it's like creating earthquakes that are like swallowing up villages and people and stuff, right? So this is like King Kong arriving, right? This is a giant monster movie now. Yeah. And Gilgamesh and Enkidu have to kind of have a gearing up montage.
It goes back to that Rocky training montage that we have here, in order to fight the ultimate, warriors. And there's definitely, even reading like translations of the original text, there's definitely like this UFC undercurrent kind of going here with these guys of like, we shall tear the flesh from this beast before us. There's a lot of great
WWF
quotes, really.
Pop-up speech beforehand. And one thing I love about this is that because Ishtar is mad that Gilgamesh rejects her, so she goes to the gods and she's like, "Give me the keys to the cage for the bull of heaven." And the gods are like, "No, definitely not. That's too much." And then she's like, because she's the goddess of death, she's like, "I will bring all of the dead back to life to consume the flesh of the living if you don't give me this key." And I was just like, damn, she just threatened like a zombie apocalypse if she doesn't get this key. Right. So they're like, "Okay, geez, you can have it." And now she's like demolishing civilization, trying to kill this one guy. And he rides out with Enkidu, and they've got to face this thing.
Oh yeah, I mean, and that's that's sort of an interesting aspect of this story too, is that like they're facing the bull of heaven, but really, the bull is just this weapon of Ishtar. Ishtar is really the warrior, that we're looking for. This is something that stories continue to do long after this, in that we're all familiar with, like in storytelling, you have a protagonist and an antagonist, right? Sure. We know the difference between the two, but there's also this really interesting character in storytelling called a contagonist. And a contagonist is a character that acts on behalf of the real bad guy. So take Star Wars, for example. Darth Vader, bad guy, right? But Darth Vader is just really acting on the direction of the Emperor. He is meant to serve the Emperor, right?
He has to answer the mafia, has to answer the Emperor. He's not the enemy. He's just a weapon. He's
the weapon of the enemy. So in a sense, this bull of heaven is sort of the Darth Vader to Ishtar's, emperor. Or I mean, we're still telling stories in that way, and I think that's super interesting.
The bull in heaven, the bull of heaven was the friends we made along the way.
Exactly. That in the end, the bull takes off the mask, and it's just this old man, who is Luke Skywalker's father. that's really what happened. No, that's not. That's a whole different story. That's not what happens at all.
They hid it in what is referred to the first version I read of it said they hid it in the quote slaughter spot, which sounded graphic to me.
The slaughter spot.
Apparently, that's a spot. That's an actual spot that somebody reading this would have recognized. But for me, it just sounded like an uppercut to the ball.
The slaughter spot. Ooh, right in the slaughter spot.
Yep. The bull dies. He goes back to his people and he says, "Who is first among men? Who is most glorious of fellows?" And all of the people who once hated him, now that he has saved them from imminent destruction, shout, "You are!" Right. I always think about
even
Barry Gordy's
before
The Last Dragon.
Yeah, even before that happens, we missed this moment where Enkidu actually takes the severed thigh of the bull and throws it at Ishtar. And to me, it's like, you talk about adding insult to injury. They've destroyed this bull, and it's like, I'm going to throw parts of the carcass of the bull at you because that's how badass I am.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, you're a sex goddess. Here's this thing's groin. Bam.
Right. But I love that last dragon moment, though, where everybody's, doing the, again, it feels like this big, WWE, match that's just happened where everybody's chanting, their names afterwards.
Yes. Yeah. And they're these huge heroes. It's this big heroic moment, but this is still act 2 of the story because Ishtar this is the midpoint, right? Because Ishtar is the goddess of death, and death always wins.
Oof. And death is going to hit hard in a character that we don't expect to be taken out. This is a real plot twist, again, that we're still telling stories like this thousands of years later, where this character we don't expect to die, boom, dies.
Yes. And who is it?
It is Enkidu. Enkidu dies, and Gilgamesh is crushed. He doesn't just power through the pain here. He weeps, and he even refuses to bury Enkidu. He says he's going to just watch the body decay.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I mean, this
is
is
not like heroic either. Enkidu just gets sick and he dies. Yeah. I think that happened to people all the time. Powerful people got sick and died for no reason, or for reasons that were not understood at the time. And that just happens. Like, his greatest warrior to ever live, he gets sick. He's sick for a week and he dies of a fever. And it's like, what that happened? What is this?
Which at the time people were like, yeah, that adds up. I'm sure, that's like you said, people die all the time unexpectedly.
24, had a good life.
right. That's great. But yeah, I feel like it is also worth saying that, this is like really rare in the stories of this age, that we have this really powerful king warrior that like weeps over the loss of his friend.
I remember thinking that recently. I was rereading the Odyssey recently, and they're always like crying because they miss home. They're just sad and they're like weeping, and they're just like, I wish I was home. I hate this. I miss my family. And it's a component of masculinity that we try to like repress in modern storytelling, right? Of just being like, I'm sad. I wish I was home right now. Like, oh, what's wrong with you, coward? Suck it up. Get mad. You just channel that sadness into anger and attack something. Right?
Yeah.
And so for some of the ancient sources like this, you do see this. They rend their clothes. They're sad. They can't be consoled for a couple of days. And that happens to
well-rounded. Yeah, well-rounded. They have emotional complexity that a lot of our sort of modern badass heroes don't have, and that's I think that's a bit of a loss, because it shows like inside of me I have every one of these characters, right? I've got Gilgamesh, and I've got Enkidu, and I've got Ishtar, and I've got the Bull of Heaven, and all of these exist inside of me, which is what makes myth so powerful, according to Joseph Campbell. He said all the gods are inside of you, that every one of these characters in these stories is actually something inside of you that you can relate to.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Because when you see Gilgamesh be sad here, it's like, I can remember my dad being sad maybe like 3 times, and all 3 times it was like real powerful. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I feel like this guy feeling a real emotion and allowing himself to feel it for maybe the first time in his life is important for the story. He doesn't necessarily process it in the best way, but he does feel it.
Well, and he's changed by it, because this is what drives really the next part of the story. Is he says in the story, if Enkidu could die, I guess that means I could die. And this is something he has not considered before. And his own, immortality ends up being what drives, the next part of the story. He doesn't go looking for a new enemy. He goes looking for immortality. He wants to try and figure out, okay, how do you defeat death? I'm going to take on death itself. And he sort of rage quits being king. He just decides, I'm done. I'm going to go out. I'm going to go and sail the waters of death. And that's not ego. That's like existential courage on his part.
I need answers to
impressive.
this. I have to go on the spirit journey. I have to figure out what's wrong. Keep building the wall while I'm gone.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Keep building that.
Keep working on the wall.
Keeps
I'll
going
be back eventually.
Right. So true. And we talked earlier about this idea of Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. This is really the hero's journey in action here. When Gilgamesh goes out on his own quest, his own journey, we see a lot of the same things that happen in this story that we see in these other heroic journeys, like even Star Wars and Harry Potter, stories like this.
Right. It's the thing you see. You have to leave what you're comfortable with. He finally leaves his city that he's the king of. He has to go out into the wilderness. He goes to the waters of death, where if you touch the water, you die. He's got to go to all these dangerous places. He's alone. There's no friends, nobody to help him. His only friend is dead. And he's just got to rely on himself to get out there and have this spirit journey to learn something about himself and about the world. And it takes him to some pretty interesting places. So he meets like the only guy in the world that's immortal. As one of the first so that's who he goes to talk to. He's like, there's a guy out here who lives on the edge of civilization, and he's the only person that's immortal, and I got to figure out what's his secret. And buy whatever supplements he's taking.
Yeah, I mean, this is a pretty interesting character too. It's one of the hardest Babylonian names to pronounce, but it's Unapushtim. And Unapushtim.
I was going to leave it for you because I've only ever seen it written, and I was like, I'm not going to say his name. I just have Noah in quotation marks.
Well, and that's the thing. Yeah, he's like this precursor to Noah, right? Because he survived this great flood, and we start to see, by the way, all sorts of little winks in the Epic of Gilgamesh that show up in the Judeo-Christian scriptures later, which is super interesting. But yeah, he's like Noah.
The gods flooded the earth, and he was one of the only survivors. And in response for like all the good work he did to like save 2 of every animal or whatever, he's blessed with immortality.
Yes. Yeah.
So just do that, Gilgamesh.
Dude, just do that. Yeah. But it also is like, it's sort of like a moment in Star Wars where Luke Skywalker meets Ben Kenobi, right? Where there is this this wise older figure that's lived through some things that nobody's lived through, and can impart some wisdom. And, I think this character is really one of the most interesting characters in the story, because it's really here, that Gilgamesh learns you can't beat death. You're not going to beat death. Even though this guy seemed to get the gift of immortality, it's not like the gods are going to flood the earth again and I'll get to go save 2 animals. That's this guy's story, but it's not going to be my story. It's not what I'm going to get to do. I'm going to have to integrate death in that loss. I'm not going to get to overcome it.
Right. There are a couple like little slow starts. This guy tells him about a plant that he could eat that's at the bottom of the ocean. Oh, you can't get it. It's at the bottom of the ocean. It's impossible. So he swims down, finds it, gets it, pulls it up out of the water, swims to the surface, is about to eat it, and then like a snake steals it away.
Right. This is the very first version of Anaconda. The movie Anaconda is it's exactly what happens.
Ice Cube in the scenario.
Exactly.
It's also the Adam and Eve story because it's a food related snake thing happening.
Right. Yeah. We see a lot of echoes, that end up echoing later here in other stories for sure.
Mm-hmm. And so he travels out to try to beat death. He tries a couple different things and none of them work. And at the end of the day, he realizes, I'm not going to beat death. This is just part of who I am now. And so he goes back home with that knowledge and has to live out the rest of his life with the knowledge that he will one day die, but also he is still the king of the most powerful city on earth and lives in wealth and everything's probably okay for the rest of his life.
I kind of like the fact that he fails, but he owns it. He kind of says, I should have tried harder. Look at these walls, right? But he realizes something important with those walls, and that is that you may not live forever, but you can create things or build things that can outlive you and maybe live forever. Right. And that's a pretty powerful lesson for all of us. That's pretty hardcore.
Definitely. Like one of his last words is kind of like, at least that wall will never fall down. But then it does, I guess, because we don't even know if it really ever existed. But we did get the story, which is the story was the walls all along or something. The legend of him remains. So he does stay in our public consciousness, even though we're honestly unsure if those walls were ever real.
Yeah. It's we can walk away with that, with this idea that it's, you are going to die. So build something decent, in the time that you have here. But yeah, those walls, I think it's interesting because those walls serve so many purposes in this myth. They're, what is left of him after he's gone. But also those same walls ended up sort of imprisoning him earlier in the story. Yes.
And that's a really good point. Because every great thing he does, he has to go outside those walls to do it. Even fighting the bull, he doesn't do it in his city. Right. He goes out the city to do it.
That's right.
That's really interesting way of looking at that.
Well, it reminds me of sort of the complexity of one of my favorite old school films is The Wizard of Oz. I love The Wizard of Oz. And I used to really struggle with that story because it seemed like the point of the story was if you ever leave home, all you're going to ever want to do is just try and get back home. That don't ever leave home because all you're going to want to do is try and figure out a way to get back home. And, there's that old truth that you can't ever truly go home because the home that you go back to is different when you get back there. It's never the same. Yeah. And I think that's something we see in this story with Gilgamesh too, is every time he comes back, it's not like he ever really gets to come back home when he passes the threshold of those walls.
Right. And we see this a lot with the historical stories too. And we do a lot of that for Badass of the Week. These people will go out and have these adventures. And when they come back, it's different. They're not the same people that they were when they left, and the same things that made them happy then don't anymore. Yeah. And I think that's an interesting part of the story. Yeah. So is that, a lot of times what I like to do with these is kind of talk about what's the lesson of the story. And this one is kind of built around trying to tell a lesson, which is a little bit easier than trying to find meaning from the life of Genghis Khan or something. But we should ask the question, what's the, what did we learn here? And what is it about this story that kind of makes it still compelling and relevant 5,000 years after it was written? Or chiseled into a tablet?
For me, it's two things that stand out about this story. And, one, it's that we have this story that basically teaches us that strength by itself isn't enough. That strength is great and it can get you a long way in life, but it's never going to be enough. You're eventually going to lose to death. And for me, Gilgamesh is a badass, not because he couldn't die, but because he learned how to live once he knew that he would die. Mm-hmm. That to me is a pretty powerful lesson. It's not, I know we live in an age, right, of discussions about uploading our consciousness to the clouds and, will AI allow us to maybe live on forever? And There's a part of that sounds great, and there's another part of that actually sounds like the worst curse that humans could ever have, is to live forever. There's something really powerful of knowing there's a deadline on what we can do in this life and in this world. And I believe, are the only creatures living on the planet that are aware we're going to die. I don't think we see that in animals or plants or any other living creature. Yeah. But we're aware we're going to die. And this story asks one of the most profound questions is, so what are you going to do with that time that you have? What are you going to do?
Right. I love that. I mean, I was reading something about that recently. It was like, anybody who thinks you could live forever in a machine has never tried to like pull something off a floppy drive from 10 years ago on the computer, you know? Right. But like, I do think you're right, because we don't want the same people doing the same thing over and over again. You want to create a thing, you want to make a matrix, and then have the next generation improve upon that story, right? You want to make a thing and then leave it for the next generations to do something with. Here's this thing that I made. You can do better, right? Like I've got a 5-year-old, and it's just like, I don't want him to write the same stories I wrote. I want him to make them better. You know, I want him to do something bigger and better. And, you know, I can pass along what I know and what I have, but yeah, I don't think I'd want to be 10,000 years old. I think that sounds awful. I already don't understand like 20-year-olds now.
Right. I honestly wonder if we created that sort of technology, you know, that would allow people, anti-aging technology or whatever, that would allow people to live, you know, indefinitely. I think we'd see entire movements of people that we're choosing to die, that we're choosing not to live forever. Even though we think we want that, I think we would quickly learn that's not all it's you know, meant to be. And the point is that we have right now, and that's all we ever have is right now. And the minute we try and lay our hands on it or grasp it, it's gone. And now we have this right now, you know,
right,
and that's profound. And it's also inspiring and encouraging, and I think it makes you live life differently. You know, Joseph Campbell had this saying that I really liked, where he said he didn't believe that people were so much looking for the meaning of life as much as they were the rapturous experience of being alive. And I think that's what we see in this story is Gilgamesh is the story of a man that lived. And what better thing could we say about our own life is like, you know what? I was born, I lived a life. I know what it is to truly be alive and live. And then I die. Wow, that's powerful. You know, that's better than finding some sort of meaning and purpose, is that experience of being alive.
Right. And then coming at this from a historical context where this is a civilization where people didn't live beyond 30 very often, right. I don't think. And the strongest people were the ones who were in charge. And if you weren't the biggest and the strongest, you just fell in line. There's no point, right? And to know that, like, you know, for this message to get out to that, to resonate so strongly with that civilization of like, no, it doesn't matter how strong you're all, we're all going to die. Like, just, you know, even the line in the Iliad where like, let me just do some great thing first that should be told among people hereafter. We're all going to die, but like, let's do something big. Let's do something important or something that matters. And that is a good message. So, you know, I don't know. It's a little bit morbid, but I feel like it's inspirational. So go do something.
Right.
So, John, thank you for telling me about the story. Thank you for coming on and helping me tell Gilgamesh. Can you talk a little bit about the foundation and what you guys are doing? Absolutely.
So at the foundation, you know, we continue to try and find wisdom, you know, that Joseph Campbell unearthed or uncovered, and put that in forms that people can access. And so we, for example, just had this new series of books come out called Joseph Campbell Essentials, and everyone is like Joseph Campbell on love, Joseph Campbell on bliss, Joseph Campbell on the hero's journey. And these are little tiny books that are just quotes from Joseph Campbell, you know, where sometimes, I don't know about you, but sometimes like I just want something that I can sit down and like read for like a minute or two, that I don't need to have 2 hours, to sew into.
Flip it over to any page, read 3 things, and be like, I feel good about myself now. I feel like I learned something.
I am really trying here. This is a moment of being vulnerable. I'm really trying when I go to the bathroom now not to take my phone in there. This is the hardest discipline of anything I've ever tried to do, right? But I'm keeping one of these books in there, on the top of the toilet, and it's like, okay, so I'm not going to be in here a long time. If I stay on my phone, I stay in here too long. So I'm gonna just keep this book here. I'm gonna read just a passage or two, and then I will, take that with me,
Mm-hmm.
And actually it's kind of nice having something to read, that's just for a moment, but that I get a little something out of, too. So that's some of the work that we're doing. We also do, podcasts where we, talk about the work of Joseph Campbell. All of that you can find on the Joseph Campbell website at jcf.org. We send out a weekly newsletter where we look at movies and music and things like that, and look at how myth is affecting people's day-to-day life. And even if you're somebody that does not really resonate, you think of myth as being, it's that stuff we had to read back when I was in 6th grade about the Greeks and Romans. I really look at mythology. I love history and mythology, but I really look at mythology as the stories people tell to make sense of the world around them. And right. I think we're still telling those stories today.
Yes. If you consume any fiction, there's probably a myth out there you would like.
That's right.
There's probably some part of mythology would be interesting to you.
That's right.
Like any fiction that has ever been created.
It's really, really true. And I really think that there's always a lot that we can figure out about the world we live in now by looking at the experiences and stories people told hundreds and thousands of years ago. And in some ways, it brings me comfort to think, the same questions people were asking back then, the same issues they were struggling with back then, I'm still asking those questions. I'm still resonating with those themes and those ideas. And it makes me feel a little less alone in the world, which is kind of great.
It's a really interesting thing that comes up a lot when I'm doing history stuff, where it's just like, yes, the technology is different. We have better medicine now. We have different clothes. We have different language. We have different technology, but people haven't really changed that much since the days of Gilgamesh. They're still thinking about sex and death and, and like wanting to build something, wanting to do something with your life before everybody forgets about you. All of the people that haven't really changed, the human being has not changed that much in these thousands of years. And that's kind of cool to think that we have this shared human experience. It's pretty cool.
It is.
John, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been really awesome talking to you about this. And I really hope that we'll get to have you back on at some point in the future to do another myth or something else. But it was awesome talking to you.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, I forgot to ask, where can people find you online? You mentioned jcf.org, but is there anywhere else?
If people are looking for me, my website is tellingabetterstory.com, and you can find all my social media handles and all that sort of stuff there. I'm pretty active on Instagram, but would love to connect with anybody that is interested in this stuff.
Sounds great. Okay, well, John, thank you so much. And thanks to all of you out there for listening to this episode. If you liked it, please also be active on Instagram and share our stuff. It really helps out the show. So, all right, thank you guys so much. And we'll see you next week. Until then, stay badass. Badass of the Week is produced by High Five Content and $7 Productions. Executive producers are Dwayne Johnson, Danny Garcia, Andrew Jacobs, Hiram Garcia, Brian Gewirtz, Frankie Chaparino, and of course, me, Ben Thompson. Writing is by me and my semi-regular but always awesome co-host, Dr. Patricia Larish. Story editing by Ian Jacobs. Our mixing, music, and sound design is done by the incomparable Jude Brewer. Production support by Jean McGale-Waite. Badass of the Week is based on my website, badassoftheweek.com, where you can read all sorts of stories about other badasses. If you want to reach out with questions or ideas, you can email us at badasspodcast@badassoftheweek.com. If you like this podcast, please subscribe, follow, listen, tell your friends, and tell your enemies. And please leave us a review. If you want to support Badass of the Week, please check out our Patreon page. We'll be back next week with another one.